Good day everyone, this is Uglo Fashion and you're welcome to my channel. So today we are learning this gown. It's a straight gown, it has slits at the back and with just small peplum, and it has collar as well, even though my mannequin is not doing justice to the collar and the sleeve because there's no sleeve, it has no hand. So if you like this video, please share, subscribe and like my video as well. Thank you
For
very much.
this tutorial for the straight, I'm making use of this Ankara, then my lining. This is what I'm going to cut it with first, then I will now transfer it to this my fabric, then paper stay and ear stay, because it's still going to have peplum. I'm going to use this for the bustier part and the peplum, why this for the skirt, for the down part. I'll use for this tutorial is bust is 11 inches, that's from shoulder to bust 11 inches, shoulder to under bust 15, shoulder to half length 17, circumference of the bust 41, circumference of the under bust 35.5, circumference of the half length 37.5, nipple to nipple 7.5. Then the gown length, the long gown length is 60, the shoulder is 17, the hip is 49. So the first part I'm going to cut is the down bodies, and I'm going to make use of the measurement of the half length and the gown length. The gown length is 60 inches, so minus the half length, that's 17. So 60 minus 17 will give me 43. So I'll first measure the 43 inches. This is the 43 inches. Then after measuring that, I'm not going to add any folding allowance to this. Since this is the lining, I'm still going to use my Ankara fabric to cut the normal gown. So what I will do is the 1 inch I have to add to this, I will add it to my lining for the folding. But since I'm going to use this to turn it, I may not really need any allowance for the folding. All I need is like ½ inch. So after that, I will put my tape rule under my half length, but I'll just subtract half from it. You can do it this way and get your hip measurement on. Now from here, I'll determine the hip measurement on 9 inches. Then to the knee length, I'm using 19 for the knee length. Or another way to do it is, since the half length is 17, you place your tape on 16.5 inches, you subtract half from it, so you use 16.5. Then you determine the hip. Since the person's hip is 49, the person is at least plus size, so you use 25 inches. Yeah, 25. You determine the hip on 25 inches. Then the knee length is determined on 35. You can use either 34 or 35 for it. So now on the hip length, let me rule out the hip length and the knee length. So on the hip length, I'll measure the circumference of the hip, that is 49, divided by 4 will give me 12.25. Then I'll add some allowance of 2 inches to it. I'll do likewise for the knee length. The knee length, I'll subtract 4 or 2 from here. It depends on how tiny and how shapy you want it to be. For this person, I'm going to subtract 4 inches for the person, so it will be 49 minus 4. That will give me 45. So 45 divided by 4, I'm dividing all the body parts by 4. So 49 divided by 4 will give me, 45 divided by 4 will give me 11.25. Then I'll have 2 inch seam allowance. I'll connect my line. So whatever I have here, I'll transfer it to the down part. This thing. For the waist, sorry, I have to measure the waist before doing all the other parts. But for the waist is 37.5 divided by 4 will give me 9 point, let me just round it up to 38, 9.5. 9.5, then I will add seam allowance of 2 inches. This is the front body, so I'll just cut it out. For the back bodies of the gown, I'm going to make use of, I'm going to give 2 inches zip allowance. You know, I placed my front bodies on the back bodies. I folded the fabric into two, the lining rather, and I placed the front bodies on the back body. So I left 2 inches for the zip allowance. I'll first cut this out, then work on the back side. Now I've cut it out from the remaining fabric. The next thing I'll do is from the zipper allowance, I'll just shift my front bodies a bit. Let me notch the zipper allowance first. So I'll just shift it a bit so you can see what I'm doing. Then from here, this is the new length. I'm going to go in with 1 inch, 1 inch. Then I will connect it to the hip length. I'll just slant it to the hip length because there's still going to be opening here. This is just to give the backside shape. And I'll open up my, so this is it for the back and the front. That's for the down part. So I will now work on the upper body. The next thing I want to do now is I want to cut the peplum for the gown. So I folded my fabric into two. Then I'll go this way. The peplum is a very small peplum. It's not really big. So it's like 5 inches. So I will add 1 inch for my seam allowance. So which means I'm using 6 inches for this peplum. And if you look at it closely, it is 720 degree. So I will chalk out my 6 inches. For the peplum, I'm using 720 degree, so which means I'm going to divide the circumference of the half length by 8, not by 4. If it is 360, I'm going to divide it by 4. But since it's 720, that means 360 into 2, that's by 8. So 38 divided by 8 will give me. So from the tip to the first arc is 3 inches. So I'll go around with the 3 inches. I've chalked everything round. So I chalked the 3 inches round. Then I measured the circumference I got there. Then from there, I'll go back to the top. Then measure to where I measured the 6 inches earlier. Then go around with what I have there as well. Then I'll cut everything out. So I'm going to cut two of this. Since it's 720 degree. So I'll cut two of that. Then after that, I made my bustier. So for the bustier, the first thing I measured is the half length. The half length is 17, so I added half inch to it for my seam allowance. And after that, the nipple point, which is 11 inches, the under bust 15 inches. So I'll rule everything now.
Then I'll come to the folded part. You know the fabric is on fold, so the folded part, I'll measure 1 inch. That's for the front of my bustier, the bustier of the gown. So I measured 1 inch from the shoulder to the half length. Then I rule out everything. I measured the circumference of the shoulder. That's 17. 17 divided by 2 will give me 8.5. So from the 8.5, I'll measure 7 inches for my armhole. Then I'll come back to the nipple point. Then I'll measure the circumference of the nipple point. Sorry, I'll measure the shoulder. From the shoulder, I'll measure 4.5 inches. Then back to the nipple to nipple of my bust, which is 7.5 plus half will give me 8 inches. Then after that, I'll come out with 2 inches. Sorry for the bustier, I didn't add any half. I made a mistake. So it's now that I will now add the half. The figure I used there is 7.5 divided by 2. Then now I'm adding the half to it. I will now connect it to the shoulder. The 4.5 I measured earlier on the shoulder, I'll connect it to it. Then from that 4.5, I measured another 3.5 inches. Then the remaining 1.5 from the 2.5 I measured, I'm going to connect it to that 3 inches to give me the bustier shape. I have a video on bustier, how to cut princess dark bustier, so you can check that out also. Then I will now chalk out the circumference of my bust. The total circumference, that's 41 divided by 4. Then I'll add my seam allowance of 2 inches. So I did likewise for the under bust. Please note that I'm starting from that, after that 1.1 inch I left, that's where I'm starting my measurement from. So the under bust is 35.5 divided by 4, then plus 2 inches seam allowance. Then for the half length, the circumference of the half length is 37.5 divided by 4 plus 2 inches seam allowance. So I'm going to connect my lines. So because I removed 2 inches for the bustier, I'm going to add back my 2 inches. So I've added the 2 inches. Then I'll just give it a slope there to connect to my bodies, to connect to the bust. So I'm cutting out the edge, the self edge of the clothes. I don't need it, so I'm cutting it out. Then for the armhole slope, I measured 1. I mean the shoulder slope rather, I measured 1. Now for the neckline, I measured 4 inches because I'm still going to fix in my collar. So 4 inches. Then I will slant it from the neckline to the shoulder. So for the back, I'll measure the half length. The half length is 17 inches. Then I'll add my half inch allowance, then the bustier measurement and the under bust measurement. So I rule out everything, and I remove 2 inches for my zipper allowance. So I'm going to measure that from the shoulder to the half length as well. I'll rule everything out. Then I'll measure the circumference of the shoulder. Circumference of the shoulder is 17 divided by 2 is 8.5. So I'll chalk that out. Then at the bust, the nipple point, I'll measure the circumference of the bust, which is 41 divided by 4. Then plus 2 inches seam allowance. Those measurements are taken after the zipper allowance. So now for my under bust, the under bust is 35.5 divided by 4. So I chalk it out plus 2 inch seam allowance. Then for the half length is 37.5 divided by 4 plus 2 inches seam allowance. So I'll connect my lines. Then at the shoulder level, I'll come down with 7 inches for my armhole. Then from there, I'll chalk out 4.5 inches. Then I'll come to this angle and measure 1 inch. That's just to give it the cuff, the armhole cuff. Then whatever I have at the nipple point, I'll transfer it to where the 7 inches end, then add 1 inch to it for the slope. Then I'll cut it out. So now I want to input my dart. So for the dart, after the zipper allowance, I measured the nipple to nipple. Then I added half inch to it. So after the half inch, I chalk it from that point to the nipple point again. Then I rule it out. I notch the measurements I measured there, I notch it out. So back to my neckline again, I measure 4 inches. Then from the 4 inches, I'll come down with 1 inch. Then for the shoulder slope, I measured 1 inch. Then from the neckline, I slant it to that 1 inch of the shoulder. So I'll cut it out. Then I will open up the folded part. Then I will notch my zipper allowance. My ear stage to my. So now I'm gonna head to add my ear stage to my Bustier because they must align while sewing. So I notch the underbust. So when I'm sewing, it must align. The underbust must align. Now I will need to reshape the neckline because of how the style is. So at the neckline, for my client, she doesn't want the first measurement I did was 6 inches. Now I'm coming down because I'm going to replace this part with my skin. So I'm coming down with another 6 inches from now I'm coming down with 6 inches I measured. So which means that from the neck we are going to cut like 12 inches. So I'm coming down with 7 inches. I now slant it. After that, I measured from the 1 inch I left. 1 inch. I measured another. So from that allowance, I'm coming. I'll measure 1.5 inches. So from that 1.5 inches, then I slant it to 7 inches. I measured to the. I'll cut it out 6 inches. So I'll cut out everything. After this, I will place this back on my tool. The tool I'm going to use to replace it. So I folded it into two. because I don't want it
So
to
it ought to
reveal
be
it.
one, but I want to double it so that our cleavage
I'm
won't
going
be
to
showing.
place this
Let me
in it,
pause cut.
but what I'm going to do is, because of the allowance I added, the 1 inch is not going to reflect on this shoe because it's joined. You know, this one is separate. The reason why I made that one separate is because I want to, there will still be joining after, before I fix the tool, I'll still join the front
The reason
together,
why I'm no more
the
using
middle
this
of the front.
particular zipper
So I'm not
allowance
going
I
to
gave,
make use of that
the
one
allowance,
inch.
the 1 inch
So I'll
allowance I
leave
gave earlier is because
seam allowance of like
there will
half
be no need
inch
for it. Since
for
this
the tool to be
part is going to
connected
be
to
folded
the
and there's no
front body
joining at the middle part, so I'm still
of the
going to join this.
bustier.
That's why I'm still going to retain this 1 inch allowance. So now I'll place it back. Now I'm not making use of the 1 inch again, so I'm going to make this to be at the edge. Then I'll give this allowance of joining, so I'll just give it half-inch allowance.
I added the allowance half inch to it. Now I'll cut the two.
Cut out the two.
So after cutting the
Go
two,
to my
I'll
machine
join
and
the
stitch everything together.
upper part together, then join it to my fabric. So now this is the peplum. I forget to mention earlier that the peplum has cuff at the front side, the middle of the gown. There is this cuff. So for the cuff, I measured 2 inches. Then just give it a cuff shape to the edge of the peplum. Now I'm adding my crinoline. I've added my ear state to my peplum. Now I'm adding crinoline to it. Please ensure when you are sewing your crinoline, don't allow it to stretch. Now I've sewn my two together. Sorry, I used the gum part, though I'm going to remove the paper, but I still need to sew it first, because if I don't do that, it will gum to my machine and it won't be able to stitch well. So after stitching, I'll remove it. Now I must ensure that the notch part, the under bust, the notch part there must align with each other so that it can give me the proper bustier shape. Now I've stitched everything together. I need to stitch the middle of the front, the 1 inch I left for the front. This is where it's going to take place. This is where it's going to, the effect is going to show. So I've joined it together. That's the lining. So I've joined it together. Then I've used my lining to turn my bustier. Now I want to add my tool to it. I left some openings. That's for where the collar is going to stay, where it's going to end. So for the back, I did likewise. I've joined the back too. I did likewise. I'll measure 11 inches. How I arrive at the 11 inches from the back, where this thing starts from the zipper allowance. I measured to where it's going to end, to where the collar is going to end. I measured 10.5. This is where it's going to end. So I measured 10.5. So I'm cutting two for the two sides, one for here, one for here. That's for the two sides.
So I measured 11 inches. That's because I'm still going to sew half inside. Then the 11 inches is by 1.5 inch. That's the measurement I'm going to use for the collar. Then to give the collar shape, sorry, I cut 4 of these. I'm using them to turn each other. I'm using two to turn each other, to face each other rather. So now at the midpoint, I measure not up to half, like few inch to half. You can see where I chalk. Then I slant it to the edge. Then at the edge here, I'll just give it a curve shape. Just curve it out small. So I'll just go ahead now and add my collar stitch to the 4 pieces. The down bodies of this gown, I've sewn the back together. You can see I joined them together. You know, I said I'm going to use my lining to just turn the down part. So that's the down. Then this the where I said there's going to be opening. So I stitched that side. The 1 inch I removed from the new length to the bottom, to the hip measurement. This is it. Then for the front bodies, this is the upper part. Then this is the down where I use my lining to turn in. So I'm going to join both together, both front and back bodies. I'm going to join them together and input my measurements on it. After sewing the collar, I will turn it this way to the wrong side. Then place it in between. Then sew everything together. After sewing, I will notch it so that it can relax properly. So the next thing now is to fix in my peplum. The sleeve, I'll measure the length of the sleeve where I want. The sleeve is going to be 3/4, so I'll measure 18. That's the length. Then I'm adding 2 inches for the folding. I'm going to use my lining to fold, to drag this inside. So after that, I'll measure 5, then 10 inch. So for the 5 inch, the circumference there is 15. That's the bicep is 15. 15 divided by 2 will give me 7.5. Then I will add 1 inch seam allowance. Then at the elbow, the circumference there is 14. Divided by 4 will give 7. Then plus 1 inch seam allowance. Then where the sleeve is going to end is 12. Then plus 1 inch. So I'm going to rule this to the And this is I'm just going to transfer the measurement down. Then from this 5, because of how the shape of the sleeve is, I'm going to make an armhole shape like so, but it's going to be very sharp. So I'll cut it out. Then I will notch the middle. So from there, from this angle, I'll still come down like 1.5 inch again, just to make the shoulder to really come up well. So I'll reshape this, and I'm cutting 2 of this. So I'll go ahead and cut the second one. Now, this is the launch part that I said we will first sew. I've turned my sleeve with lining. So now I'm going to sew from here to where I notched. I'll now sew the sleeve to the main body.